So I think there are two key points to make. The first is that the presidential debate is an institution within French politics, and it doesn't necessarily make a president, but it can break a candidate. And last night, expectations were really high because, if you remember, that runoff between Macron and Le Pen happened in 2017 already, when Marine Le Pen did really, really poorly. So people were really on the lookout as to whether she would come prepared to the debate, and she did. But if one was to pick a victor, so to speak, for the debate, it would clearly be Emmanuel Macron, who has been able to articulate his program quite clearly and be evidence-based in the way that he talked. Marine Le Pen, on the other hand, was fairly aloof on some questions pertaining to, how do you pay for your reforms and your propositions? What is your policy with Russia? Because as we know, Vladimir Putin and Russian banks have supported Marine Le Pen. So there were a few instances where she was missing in action, so to speak.
Yeah. It was also really important for President Macron because Le Pen has really been closing the gap in the polls.
The polls are predicting that Emmanuel Macron will win somewhere between 52 and 54% of the votes. But as we well know, the polls in recent years have failed when you think of Trump, when you think of Morrison, when you think of Brexit. So people in France are bracing themselves really for this election, but in reality, it is fairly unlikely that Marine Le Pen will win. Why? Because we have to remember that Marine Le Pen is the heir, quite literally, of Jean-Marie Le Pen. Her party today is called the National Gathering, but it's based on the National Front, which was an openly racist, homophobic, anti-Semitic party. And many French are really not willing to support a political party that is based on this tradition. Here, history really matters. And people from the left, even from the far left, are much more likely to vote for Emmanuel Macron to keep the Republic as it is, as opposed to vote for Marine Le Pen, who represents the far right.
And of course, talking of the far left, in the first runoff, they got a significant part of the vote. Do you think you're going to see them swing in behind President Macron?
Okay, so the first thing that needs to be explained here is that the French political system is quite different to the Australian one. So when we vote here, we have a preferential system. In France, for the presidential election, you've got a two-round system where the winners takes it all. In the first round, there were 12 candidates. Macron came first, Marine Le Pen for the far right came second, and Jean-Luc Mélenchon from the far left came third, very close to Marine Le Pen, in fact. The key point about this French election of 2022 is that for the first time, the far left and the far right scored higher than the moderate parties of the left, the centre, and the right put together. So this is very scary because what it means is that the political spectrum in France is becoming more radical to the far left, more radical to the far right, or at least these ideologies are attracting more people than they used to. So that is going to be a real challenge for Emmanuel Macron, even if he gets re-elected, because many French people will not see him as legitimate because they think, well, I voted for the far left or the right at the first round, but I get someone from the centre as a president. But this is the way the French model works. And so far, people have accepted the rules of that model, but increasingly they're becoming critical of the very system that elects a president.
To that point, President Macron came in on a wave of popularity, promising reforms. A lot of those have stalled. Is it going to be difficult for either Marine Le Pen or Macron to fulfil any agenda?
Look, with regard to reforms, it must be said that the pandemic has been extremely disruptive. And it is true that when Emmanuel Macron was elected in 2017, he promised many reforms, including on pensions and retirement age, for instance, on the environment. And the pandemic interrupted this. But before the pandemic, we have to remember that there was the Yellow Vest movement, which was quite violent, to say the least. And so his authority was really challenged by the Yellow Vest movement. And in fact, he was able to build back some of this authority by managing the pandemics in a way that history will probably judge as quite measured. The Macron government, or rather the Edouard Philippe government, who was a prime minister of Emmanuel Macron, provided a lot of support to businesses and to the French during the pandemic. Now, looking into the future, when you think of the reform that Marine Le Pen wants to put in place, be that with regard to the cost of living, be that with regard to Europe, be that with regard to immigration, a lot of them, I'm sorry to say, but I need to say very clearly, are completely unrealistic. They're unrealistic because sometimes they're not evidence-based, or they're unrealistic because they cannot be approved within the constitutional framework of France.
Mm-hmm. So Sunday's the vote. What is your expectation?
Well, look, I mean, I don't know what the French, who the French are going to vote for on Sunday. The general consensus, though, is that Emmanuel Macron will come through. But let's say that he doesn't, and let's say that Marine Le Pen becomes president. Would this be a major issue? The very important point that needs to be made here is that you cannot govern France if you don't have the majority in the Assemblée Nationale, in the lower house. The election for this are going to happen in June. In 2017, Marine Le Pen party got 6 members of parliament out of 577. In other words, the National Front, or the National Gathering, is a non-existing political force in the French system. It does well at presidential election, but it does very poorly when it comes to electing member of parliament. And without the majority at the Assemblée Nationale, you cannot form government. And if you don't have a government, the National Assembly will appoint one for you, or the majority at the Assembly will appoint one. And therefore, you'll have a president from the extreme right and a government that will represent the majority. This has happened in the past. Left-wing President Mitterrand had a government from the right. Right-wing President Jacques Chirac had a government from the left. And in this situation, it is the government that leads the country. So if Marine Le Pen wins on Sunday, don't flee the country, because not all is lost.
Romain, really good to talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time.